The exploration team was floating in the dark void of space, far away from Earth. For months, they had been searching for a planet that could hold the key to humanity's origins, the long-lost homeworld that had been forgotten over time. The mission was risky, but the chance of uncovering the truth about their ancestors made the danger worth it. As the captain, Alina, stared at the star map, she felt the weight of the responsibility on her shoulders. She knew this journey could change everything. The team was made up of scientists, engineers, and soldiers. Each one had their own reason for being there, but they all shared one common goal: to find the truth about where humanity had started. The ship, the Horizon, hummed quietly as it traveled through the vast emptiness of space. The crew had become close over the months, sharing stories, fears, and hopes for what they would discover. But none of them knew just how dangerous this mission would become. It was on the 103rd day of their journey when the sensors finally picked up something unusual. The ship's AI, called Dara, alerted them to an object deep within a nearby star system. The object was not just a planet. It was something more, a blue and green planet, just like Earth, but with a strange energy signature. The readings were unlike anything they had ever seen before. The excitement on the ship was immediate. The discovery they had been waiting for had finally arrived. Alina stood up, her voice calm but filled with excitement. "Set course for the planet. We're going down there. Prepare for landing," she ordered. The crew sprang into action, and soon they were on their way to the surface of what could be humanity's homeworld. As the ship descended toward the planet, the atmosphere seemed eerily still. There were no storms, no clouds, and no signs of life. It was as though the planet was holding its breath. Alina looked out the window, her heart racing. It was beautiful, yet unsettling at the same time. The deep blue oceans and green forests looked so familiar, yet they felt alien. It was as if this world had been waiting for them, just as they had been waiting for it. When the ship's landing gear finally touched the surface, there was a collective sigh of relief. But that relief was short-lived. As the crew disembarked, something strange happened. The air felt heavy, almost suffocating. The ground beneath their feet was soft, like sand, but it wasn't sand. Something about it was wrong. The team began to set up their equipment, scanning the area, but no one spoke. They were all too focused on the strange feeling that seemed to hang in the air. Alina signaled for the team to move forward. The mission had only just begun, and they needed answers. They ventured into a dense forest, the trees towering above them like giants. The path was narrow, and the air was thick with an unfamiliar scent, like something decayed. It was an odd combination of beauty and danger. As they walked deeper into the forest, the sense of unease grew stronger. Every rustle of leaves seemed to echo through the silence. Suddenly, one of the scientists, Dr. Leela, stopped in her tracks. She pointed to something in the distance, her voice trembling. "Look, over there. Do you see that?" The team turned to see what she was referring to. At first, it looked like a faint shimmer, like a mirage. But as they got closer, it became clear. There was a massive structure buried deep in the forest. It was an ancient building, but it didn't look like anything the team had ever seen. Its design was unlike any known human architecture. It was made of strange materials, glowing faintly in the dim light of the planet's sun. Alina's heart raced. What is that? It looks too perfect, too old. She knew they had to investigate, but something inside her told her to be cautious. She motioned for the team to follow her. As they moved closer to the structure, the air grew colder, and the feeling of dread became almost unbearable. When they finally reached the building, they found that it was covered in strange symbols that didn't resemble anything from Earth's history. Dr. Leela, who was an expert in ancient languages, stepped forward to examine them. "This is unlike anything I've ever seen. These symbols don't match any known language," she said, her voice filled with awe and fear. "This structure is ancient, much older than anything we know." Alina felt a chill run down her spine. "What is it? Why does it feel like we're being washed?" The feeling of being observed was overwhelming, as if eyes were on them from every angle. The crew turned nervously, scanning their surroundings. But the forest was still. The only sounds were the soft whispers of the wind through the trees. There was no movement. It felt like the planet itself was holding its breath, waiting for something. Then suddenly, the ship's communication system flickered to life, but it wasn't the captain who spoke. A voice, deep and distorted, echoed through the speakers. It was a warning, but the words were jumbled, as though it had been transmitted through some kind of interference. Do not approach, leave now, or face the consequences. The voice seemed to fade, leaving behind only the eerie silence. The crew stood frozen, their eyes wide with disbelief. What had they just heard? Was it a warning from someone else who had been here before them? Or was it a message from the planet itself? Should we go back? One of the soldiers, Marco, asked, his voice barely above a whisper. He looked at Alina, waiting for her decision. The captain stood still, her mind racing. They had come this far, but the voice was unmistakable. Something was wrong with this planet. Alina didn't answer immediately. She knew that if they turned back now, they might never get another chance to uncover the truth about humanity's origins. But at the same time, she couldn't shake the feeling that they had made a mistake by coming here. We continue, she finally said, her voice steady despite the rising fear within her. We've come this far. We can't turn back now. The crew nodded, though some were clearly uncertain. They moved forward, deeper into the ruins, hoping to find something that would explain the strange warning. But as they explored, the atmosphere grew even more tense. The ruins seemed to stretch endlessly, as though they were part of something much larger. The strange symbols covered every surface, and the air grew colder with each step they took. It was then that they found it. Hidden deep within the ruins, they discovered a massive stone door. It was carved with the same symbols they had seen earlier, but there was something different about this one. It looked newer, as though it had been sealed recently. Alina felt her heart race. What's behind this door? She muttered to herself, more to calm her nerves than anything. But she knew that whatever was on the other side could hold the answers they had been searching for, or it could be their doom. The door creaked open with a loud, eerie sound, revealing a dark chamber beyond. The team stepped cautiously inside, their flashlights cutting through the darkness. What they saw inside made their blood run cold. At the center of the room, there was a massive stone pedestal. Upon it sat a small, glowing object. It pulsed with a strange energy that seemed to vibrate through the very air. As they moved closer, the object's glow intensified, and a deep hum filled the room, as though the planet itself was alive. Alina reached out, her hand trembling. She knew they had found something important. But as she touched the object, the ground beneath them began to shake. The walls of the chamber cracked, and a deafening roar filled the air. The entire building seemed to be coming to life, as though it was reacting to their presence. "Get back to the ship," Alina shouted. Now. The crew turned and ran, but the ground continued to shake violently. They had uncovered something ancient, something powerful. But they had no idea just how dangerous it was. The warning had been clear. The planet did not want them here. And now, they would pay the price for their curiosity. As they sprinted toward the ship, the earth cracked open behind them, and a loud metallic screech echoed through the forest. The planet was not going to let them leave easily. The crew scrambled back toward the horizon, their breaths shallow and quick as the ground beneath them trembled violently. The once still atmosphere had shifted. The planet seemed to be coming alive, reacting to their presence in a way none of them had expected. The warning voice from the ship's communication system echoed in Alina's mind. Do not approach. Leave now, or face the consequences. The captain didn't need to be reminded. She knew that whatever they had awakened was far beyond anything they were prepared for. Behind them, the ancient ruins continued to shake, the ground splitting open as if the planet itself was protesting their intrusion. Strange, unnatural sounds filled the air. Growls, screeches, and a deep, echoing hum that seemed to vibrate through their very bones. The forest around them began to change. Trees twisted and bent in unnatural angles, and the plants seemed to close in, as if reaching for them with their gnarled branches. Alina's heart pounded in her chest as she urged her team forward. They had to make it back to the ship, but the further they ran, the more difficult it became to keep their footing. The ground cracked beneath them, sending them stumbling. The air grew thick with dust, making it harder to breathe, and the once familiar landscape now looked alien, hostile. "Move! Move!" Alina shouted to her team, her voice filled with urgency. They could hear the strange creatures from earlier, the ones that had been stalking them, moving through the trees, their guttural growls growing louder with each passing moment. But they couldn't stop. Not now. Dr. Leela, the scientist, was panting heavily beside her. "Captain, what did we do? What did we awaken?" She gasped, her voice shaking with fear. "I don't know," Alina said, her voice tight. "But we're getting out of here. We can figure it out later. Just keep running." As they neared the edge of the forest, the ground seemed to quake even more violently, and a deafening roar filled the air. Something huge was approaching from behind, shaking the very earth beneath their feet. The trees shook violently as if being uprooted, and the sky above darkened, casting an ominous shadow over them. It was like the planet was rejecting them, trying to push them away. Suddenly, one of the soldiers, Marco, screamed out as the ground beneath him cracked wide open, swallowing him up. "Marco!" Someone shouted, but there was no time to stop. The team kept running, but Alina couldn't help but glance back, her heart heavy with guilt. They couldn't save him. Not now. The roar grew louder, and Alina's mind raced. Whatever was behind them wasn't just a creature. It was something else, something more terrifying. She could feel its presence, as though it was hunting them, closing in with every step they took. Finally, they broke through the trees and into the open, where the horizon stood waiting. But it didn't feel safe anymore. The ship, their lifeline, was now surrounded by an air of dread. The door was open, but they had no time to reach it. As Alina sprinted toward it, a massive shadow loomed behind them. She turned just in time to see a giant, monstrous creature crashing through the forest toward them. It was enormous, with glowing eyes and a grotesque, twisted body. Its skin was covered in what looked like thick armor, and it moved with unnatural speed, despite its size. "Get inside!" Alina screamed, her voice hoarse as she reached the ship's door. The team scrambled through the opening, and Alina was the last to enter, slamming the door shut behind her. Inside, the crew was in a frenzy, trying to get the ship's systems online. The massive creature slammed into the outside of the ship, causing it to shake violently. The walls rattled as though the planet itself was trying to tear them apart. Alina quickly took her seat at the captain's console, her hands shaking as she activated the ship's engines. But they were damaged. The systems were failing. They couldn't escape. She felt a cold sweat on the back of her neck as the realization hit her. They were trapped. "Captain, the engines are fried," one of the engineers said, his voice tinged with panic. "We can't lift off. Not without repairs." "We don't have time for repairs," Alina shouted, her voice raw with urgency. The creature outside was still pounding on the hull, and the ship's systems were growing weaker by the second. "We need to find a way to get out of here. Now." Just as she spoke, the creature let out another deafening roar, and the ship shook harder. Alina's mind raced. They had to do something. Anything. They couldn't stay here. Not with that thing outside. Then a thought struck her. The planet's gravity. It was strong, but not enough to hold them down forever. They could use it to their advantage. "Alina," Dr. Leela said, her voice panicked. "The planet's gravitational field is becoming unstable. It's pulling us in more with every second. If we don't leave soon, we'll be stuck here forever." "I know," Alina replied, her voice grim. She took a deep breath, trying to steady her shaking hands. Listen, we're going to override the engines. I'll use the gravity assist to pull us up. It's risky, but it's our only shot." The crew members exchanged nervous glances, but they had no choice. Alina quickly began inputting the override commands. The creature outside let out another terrifying roar as it slammed into the ship again. The impact sent a wave of pain through Alina's body as the ship's hull groaned under the pressure. "Ready, Captain," the engineer said, his voice tight. Alina's fingers flew over the controls. She could hear the creature scraping against the ship's surface, trying to break through. The countdown began. 3, 2, 1. The engines roared to life, and the ship jolted upward. For a moment, Alina thought they were going to break apart, but then the ship lurched into the air, using the planet's gravity to catapult them away from the surface. The roar of the creature grew fainter as they climbed higher, but it was still there, somewhere, waiting for them to fall back down. As the horizon soared into space, Alina looked out the window. The planet they had just left behind was slowly shrinking, but the sense of danger was still heavy in her chest. They had barely escaped with their lives, but they hadn't escaped the mystery of the planet. What had they uncovered? And what would be the cost of their discovery? Alina couldn't answer that yet, but one thing was certain: the planet wasn't finished with them. The crew sat in tense silence as the horizon drifted further and further from the planet. The engines hummed quietly, but the atmosphere inside the ship was anything but calm. Alina couldn't shake the feeling of dread that had taken root in her chest. They had escaped the creature, but it didn't feel like an escape at all. The planet had tried to keep them there, tried to make sure they didn't leave. And yet, they were only beginning to realize how deep the mystery went. As the ship gained distance, the glowing blue and green orb that had been their hope for answers now seemed distant, eerie, and menacing. There was something about that planet, something dark hiding beneath the surface. They hadn't just stumbled upon a forgotten world. They had uncovered a warning that the planet didn't want them there. But the question remained: why? Alina walked down the narrow hallway of the ship, her mind racing. The crew had returned to their stations, each of them visibly shaken. The events of the past few hours had rattled everyone, but Alina was determined to get to the bottom of it. They needed answers. If they didn't, they might be the next victims of whatever curse was haunting the planet. She reached the main control room, where Dr. Lila was already at the data console, scanning the information they had collected from the planet's ruins. The scientist's eyes were bloodshot, exhaustion evident in her face, but there was a spark of determination in her gaze. "Alina," Lila greeted her, not looking up from the screen. "We need to talk." Alina took a deep breath, bracing herself. "What did you find?" Lila paused for a moment before turning to face her, her expression troubled. "The planet. It's not what we thought. It wasn't just a lost homeworld of humanity. There's something else, something far darker, buried beneath its surface." She pressed a few buttons on the console, bringing up a holographic image of the ruins they had explored earlier. The symbols were still there, glowing faintly in the air. "Look at these symbols," Lila said, pointing at them. "They're not just decorative. They're part of an ancient warning system, a failed experiment. The civilization here, whoever they were, tried to do something with time. Something went horribly wrong, and it created this. The planet itself became a prison, a trap, and it's been waiting for anyone who dares to set foot on it." Alina frowned, trying to make sense of Lila's words. A time experiment. What does that mean? Lila's voice was low and grim. "It means that this planet, this whole system, is caught in a loop, a cycle that the ancient civilization created. They tried to manipulate time, but they couldn't control it. And the result was this." She waved her hand, gesturing to the glowing symbols on the screen. "The planet became a death trap. Every time someone discovers it, every time someone lands, the cycle repeats. The curse comes back." Alina felt her heart race again, the weight of Lila's words sinking in. "So, We've just triggered it. We've started the cycle all over again. Leela nodded solemnly. Yes, the experiment caused a fracture in time itself, and now anyone who enters the planet's orbit or lands on its surface becomes part of that cycle. We weren't supposed to find it. We weren't supposed to disturb it. The gravity of the situation hit Elena like a physical blow. They had not just uncovered humanity's forgotten homeworld. They had unleashed something that could threaten them all, and perhaps even the rest of the galaxy. The mysterious creatures that had attacked them were just the beginning. The true horror was still to come. We need to warn the others, Elena said urgently, already turning toward the door. We need to leave this system, now, before it's too late. Leela's hand shot out, stopping her. Elena, we can't just run. The damage is already done. We've awoken something. If we leave now, it won't stop. We have to find a way to fix this, to stop the curse before it spreads. Elena met Leela's eyes. What do you mean, fix it? The planet's a death trap. What can we possibly do? Leela turned back to the console, scrolling through more data. I'm not sure yet, but there might be something in the ruins that can help us reverse the damage. If we can find the core of the experiment, the heart of whatever went wrong, maybe we can shut it down. But it's risky. We don't even know if it's still functional or if it will work. It could just make things worse. Elena took a deep breath. She knew they couldn't afford to take the risk, but there was no choice. They had awakened something on that planet, and if they left without trying to fix it, it would likely spread to others. Humanity, and maybe even the entire galaxy, could be at risk. Then we go back, Elena said, her voice firm. We don't have a choice. We need to find the heart of the experiment and shut it down, or we could doom everyone. The decision was made. The crew had already faced unimaginable danger, and now they would have to face it again. But this time, it wasn't just about survival. It was about stopping the curse before it spread. Elena knew that their journey into the ruins hadn't just uncovered humanity's past. It had opened a door to a nightmare they couldn't ignore. The crew began preparing for their return to the planet. Everyone moved with a sense of urgency, but there was a noticeable tension in the air. They had already escaped once. Would they be able to do it again? As the horizon began its descent back toward the surface of the planet, Elena couldn't help but feel that the worst was yet to come. The planet was waiting for them. And this time, it wasn't just the creature they had to fear. It was the curse itself, the force that had twisted the planet into a deadly trap, and which might very well destroy them all. The ship touched down again, but as soon as the engines powered down, the strange silence returned. It was as if the planet itself was holding its breath, waiting for them to make their move. But this time, Elena was ready. She had no choice but to face whatever waited in the ruins, and hope that they could stop the cycle before it was too late. The door to the ship opened, and the crew stepped out once again onto the surface of the planet. The atmosphere was thick with tension. The strange creatures were nowhere to be seen, but Elena could feel their presence lurking just beyond the trees, watching them, waiting. The ruins ahead loomed ominously, their dark secrets buried deep within. They were going in, and there would be no turning back. The planet had shown them its wrath once. Would they survive the second time? Or would they become part of the endless cycle that the ancient civilization had left behind? Elena didn't know, but she knew they had to try. For humanity. For their future. They pressed forward into the heart of the ruins, their footsteps echoing in the quiet, as the weight of their mission settled on their shoulders. Time was running out. The ruins were much darker now, the once inviting glow of the symbols replaced by an eerie, oppressive atmosphere. As Elena and the crew moved deeper into the heart of the ancient structure, it felt as though the walls themselves were closing in on them. The air was thick, charged with an unsettling energy that made it difficult to breathe, and every step seemed to echo with the memory of something far older than anything they had encountered before. Dr. Leela led the way, her face pale but determined, her eyes scanning the walls for any sign of the core of the experiment. The rest of the crew followed closely, their faces tense with a mix of fear and anticipation. The planet had already shown its deadly side, and the time loop curse had made it clear that they weren't welcome. But they had no choice. They had to find the heart of the experiment before the planet, and its mysteries could claim them all. "What exactly are we looking for?" Elena asked, her voice low as they moved through the corridors, her hand on the grip of her blaster, eyes darting around for any signs of danger. "We need to find the control chamber," Leela replied, her voice shaking slightly but steady. "There should be a central hub, somewhere deep in the ruins. It's where they attempted to manipulate time. If we can get there, we may be able to understand what went wrong and reverse the cycle." She paused, her brow furrowed in concentration. The technology might still be functional, though damaged. The deeper they went, the more distorted the environment became. The walls were covered in strange, glowing patterns, almost as if the planet's surface was alive, pulsing with some kind of energy. The air shimmered in places, distorting the space in front of them, and Elena couldn't shake the feeling that they were being washed. The unsettling growls and whispers they had heard earlier, when they were still running for their lives, had not ceased. It was like the planet itself was breathing with them. Suddenly, they reached an enormous chamber. The ceiling was so high it disappeared into shadows, and the walls were lined with more of the glowing symbols. In the center of the room was a massive cylindrical structure, covered in what looked like ancient machinery, its surface covered with cracks and scorch marks. It was clear that this was the heart of the experiment. The control hub Leela had mentioned. "This is it," Leela whispered, almost in awe, as she stepped forward, reaching out toward the machine. "This is where they tried to control time." Elena stood in the doorway of the chamber, her hand gripping her blaster tighter as she scanned the room. She felt a surge of adrenaline. They were so close. But there was something about the room, the way the air seemed to pulse, like it was waiting for something, that made her uneasy. Leela reached the base of the machine and began working her way through the controls. "If I can just access the mainframe," she muttered, more to herself than anyone else. She pressed a series of buttons on the cracked surface, and for a brief moment, the entire room hummed, its energy resonating through the air. Then, a burst of light flashed from the machine, blinding them all. Elena instinctively raised her hand to shield her eyes, but when the light faded, something had changed. The room was still, eerily so, and the temperature had dropped dramatically. The crew exchanged nervous glances, but as Elena took a cautious step forward, she saw it. A figure standing in the center of the room, surrounded by the swirling patterns of light. It was humanoid, but unlike any human she had ever seen. Its body was a strange amalgamation of organic and mechanical, glowing with an otherworldly energy. Its eyes, if they could even be called eyes, were two swirling pools of bright, sickly light. What is that?" Dr. Leela whispered, her voice trembling. It's not real," Elena muttered, but her words held no conviction. The figure was there, tangible and powerful. It looked like something out of a nightmare, but its presence felt so familiar. The figure lifted its arms slowly, and the energy in the room seemed to intensify. The glowing symbols on the walls pulsed faster, and the hum of the machinery grew louder, shaking the very ground beneath them. The figure's mouth moved, though no sound emerged at first. But then a voice, cold and metallic, yet strangely familiar, spoke. "You should not have come," it said, its voice reverberating through Elena's chest. "You have awakened the cycle, and now you will suffer the consequences." The air turned colder, the energy in the room becoming almost unbearable. The walls cracked as if the very structure of the ruins was breaking apart. Elena's heart raced as the figure's words echoed in her mind, and it was all she could do to keep her feet planted on the ground. "We have to stop this," Elena shouted, trying to push past the fear that threatened to paralyze her. She stepped forward, aiming her blaster at the figure. But just as she was about to pull the trigger, the figure's glowing eyes turned toward her, and she froze. Her body refused to move, as if some invisible force was holding her in place. "You cannot stop it," the figure said, its voice now a whisper. "The cycle is beyond your understanding. You cannot control time, and you cannot undo what has been done. Then we'll destroy you." Elena shouted, gathering all her strength to fight the invisible grip on her body. But just as she was about to pull the trigger again, the figure raised a hand, and everything changed. The entire room seemed to warp, bending in on itself, the space folding and unfolding like a living entity. Elena's mind reeled as she tried to process what was happening. The very fabric of reality was tearing apart. In that instant, the figure's voice came again, louder and more insistent this time. "Time is not a tool to be wielded. It is a force you cannot control. The cycle will continue. The trap is set. And now, you are part of it." Elena's mind raced as the world around her seemed to unravel. But even in the chaos, one thing was clear. They had made a grave mistake. The experiment had failed, horribly. And now, they were trapped in its wake. The cycle had begun, and there was no easy way to stop it. "Leela!" Elena shouted, but the scientist was still at the control panel, frozen in place, her eyes wide with terror as the machine hummed louder. The power in the room was growing, its influence spreading outward, taking hold of everything in its path. The energy continued to intensify. It was becoming unbearable. Elena knew they were running out of time. If they didn't act fast, they would all be swallowed by the same curse that had destroyed the ancient civilization. It was only a matter of time before the cycle claimed them too. With a surge of desperation, Elena sprinted toward the machine. There was no more thinking. They had to end it. Now. Elena reached the control panel just as the room trembled again, the walls buckling under the pressure of the shifting energy. She could hear the crackling hum of the machine growing louder, reverberating in her bones. The figure in the center of the room continued to watch them, its glowing eyes unmoving, its presence like an anchor in a storm. Elena could feel the weight of its gaze, as though it was studying her every move, anticipating her actions before she made them. "Leela!" Elena shouted, but there was no response. Lila's form was still frozen in place, her fingers hovering above the controls, as if she were trapped in some kind of stasis. The energy in the room was suffocating, bending her mind in ways she couldn't understand. It was as though time itself was warping, shifting out of alignment. Desperation clawed at Elena's chest. They had to shut it down. The machine, the figure, the whole planet. It was all tied to this control panel. If they didn't find a way to stop it, the cycle would continue, and they would be its next victims. Taking a deep breath, Elena forced herself to focus. The figure's voice echoed in her mind again, a cold and calculated whisper. "You cannot stop it." Elena's heart pounded. The figure was right. No one had ever stopped the cycle before. What had been started millennia ago was beyond their understanding. But she couldn't let that stop her. Not now. Not when the fate of their crew, and possibly all of humanity, was hanging by a thread. She turned to the console, her hands shaking but steady with resolve. It was complicated, beyond anything she had ever seen, but she had to try. She could feel the presence of the figure behind her, its eyes burning into her back. But she pushed it aside, focusing only on the task in front of her. The first few commands didn't work. She tried again, but the control panel rejected her every time, flashing with red warnings that sent a wave of panic through her. The energy was spiraling out of control. The walls around her seemed to pulse with each failed attempt, each flicker of red warning signs, drawing them closer to an irreversible collapse. She had no time left. "Think, Elena. Think," she muttered to herself. Her mind raced as she remembered the ruins they had explored, the data Leela had uncovered about the time experiment. There had been something about synchronization, something about using the planet's core to stabilize the temporal fracture. Elena's eyes widened as she understood. The machine, they had to sink it. It wasn't about overriding it. It was about matching the cycle, aligning the machine with the natural rhythm of time. If they could find that frequency, they could break the loop, or at the very least, reset it. The problem was, the core of the machine was damaged. She could see that now. The cracks in the surface, the scorch marks. It had been malfunctioning for centuries, and the planet's energy had fed into it, building on itself until it became the curse that had consumed the ancient civilization. They needed a way to tap into its original programming before it all went wrong. As she continued to input commands, something strange happened. The glowing symbols on the walls began to flicker in response to her actions. It was subtle at first, almost like the room was waking up, reacting to the commands she was giving. Alina knew she was on the right track, but the tension in the air thickened, and the figure's eyes glowed brighter. "It won't work," the figure said, its voice cold and final. "You cannot undo what has been done." But Alina refused to give up. She knew this was their only chance. With one final, desperate motion, she entered the last command. The entire room seemed to hold its breath. The energy in the chamber shifted, swirling around them in an unearthly hum. The light from the machine blazed brighter, and for a split second, Alina thought the ship might explode from the sheer intensity of the energy. Then, as if on cue, the figure in the center of the room disappeared. The walls stopped shaking, the hum of the machinery fell to a low, steady pulse, and the temperature returned to normal. It was done. The crew stood in stunned silence, trying to process what had just happened. The oppressive weight that had hung over them for what felt like an eternity lifted, and the strange, otherworldly presence that had watched them, judged them, was gone. But as the light dimmed and the hum of the machine faded to a quiet whisper, Alina knew that they hadn't truly solved everything. The planet's curse was still there, lurking beneath the surface. The cycle might be broken for now, but there were remnants of its influence still hanging in the air, as if waiting for the next trigger. "Alina." Lila's voice broke through the silence, her voice thick with emotion. She was still standing by the control panel, but her eyes were wide with awe and fear. "We did it. We actually did it." Alina nodded slowly. "We stopped it, for now. But the planet, it's still dangerous. The cycle might be broken, but there are still things we don't understand. This place is cursed. We need to leave. Now." The rest of the crew slowly began to gather themselves, their eyes scanning the room as if waiting for the next disaster to strike. But there was no time to waste. Alina turned and headed for the exit, her mind racing. They had come so close to losing everything, but they had survived. They had shut down the machine, reset the cycle, and escaped the grasp of the planet. As they boarded the horizon, the crew was silent, each of them lost in their thoughts. The planet loomed in the distance, a dark reminder of what they had uncovered. Alina sat at the captain's console, her hands still trembling from the intensity of what had just happened. She glanced at the view screen, watching as the planet shrank in the distance, becoming a mere speck in the vastness of space. But she knew it wasn't over. The planet wasn't just a dangerous place. It was a warning. A reminder that time itself could be manipulated, twisted, and that humanity was not immune to its consequences. They had uncovered humanity's homeworld, and they had faced its darkest secrets. But there were other planets, other mysteries out there. And Alina was certain that somewhere, out there in the vastness of space, another world was waiting, just as dangerous, just as ancient. The crew had survived this time, but for how long? As the horizon continued its journey into the stars, Alina's mind raced with the thought of the untold dangers that still awaited them.